Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When we were trying to get this podcast off the ground, we had so many questions. How do we record an episode? Where do we find background music? How do we get our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other places that people like to listen? And where do we find advertisers? The answer to every one of these questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, distributing, and monetizing your podcast. And best of all, it's 100% free and 100% ridiculously easy to use. Anchor makes it simple to get up and running. You can upload and schedule your podcasts ahead of time. It publishes to all the major podcast platforms. You can easily check your stats. I could go on, but instead, why don't you go and get started? Go to anchor.fm/start to join the eCommerce Minute and a diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. We can't wait to hear your podcast.
It's the eCommerce Minute, your daily dose of e-commerce, tech, and retail news with your hosts, Bart Mraz and John Suter. The eCommerce Minute is a production of Sumo Heavy, a digital commerce consulting firm in Brooklyn, New York, and Philadelphia. Find us on the web at sumoheavy.com. It's e-commerce Minute episode 252.
And in today's episode, Supreme Court okayed states to collect e-commerce sales tax.
On June 21st, the Supreme Court of the United States overturned a landmark precedent in the e-commerce sales tax debate in a narrow 5-4 ruling that cleared states to collect sales tax from online retailers, even if those companies don't have a physical presence in the state. Online retailers have managed to avoid paying sales tax since the initial decision in 1992. Justice Anthony Kennedy ruled that the physical presence rules upheld in the 1992 Quill Corp versus North Dakota and 1969 National Bellis Hess Incorporated versus Department of Revenue of Illinois cases are unsound and incorrect. A lot has changed since 92. According to Justice Kennedy, the initial ruling was made at a time when mail order sales totaled only $180 million. Last year, Kennedy wrote, e-commerce retail sales alone were estimated at $453.5 billion. Combined with traditional remote sellers, the total exceeds $500 billion. It's been a long-standing complaint from the bricks and mortar sector that they have to charge sales tax while their online competitors didn't. If upheld, South Dakota's law will implement an economic standard that in South Dakota would require state sales tax collection and remittance only if an online seller does more than $100,000 worth of business or processes more than 200 transactions in the state. It's big.
It's big. It's big. Well, it's kind of funny that we do this for a living, but
All right. So before we do the winners and losers, I would love to hear your opinion of what this all means.
Wonder why I did get into this before. I mean, e-commerce is always going up and they should be taxed. I know it's kind of weird to say, but they should be. I understand that it was a loophole for a very long time, but since e-commerce is pretty much will be outdoing retail, state has to make money somehow.
No, it's true. Do you think that this is maybe going on a little too long and now it's almost too late for a lot of these retailers because now it's going to be so complicated to figure out?
Yes and no. There's plenty of companies that already did it for him. Like Avalara is one, TaxJar is another one. They have their tax stuff. As long as you're integrated with them, it's already figured out. And they actually will help you report and stuff like that. So that's actually not too late. The problem is actually the perception, right? Because the big one was like, oh, I can just shop online and it's cheaper because there's no taxes. Well, Amazon's been charging taxes for 5 years now, easily, in almost every state. So it's just a perception of what e-commerce looks like, and it's going to happen.
Interesting point of view. So the real winners here will obviously be the states and the brick and mortar retailers. The states will win big if they're able to collect the millions of dollars that they lost. Bloomberg reports this broader taxation will let state and local governments collect an extra $8 to $23 billion extra a year. Mm-hmm. So big for them. Also, and you had mentioned Avalara and these other, are they payment processors or I'm not familiar?
They're tax services. Meaning
so a tax service that sits on top of your payment processor, or where does that fit into?
Checkout. It just literally tracks what the taxes are in each county or state or local and charges you appropriately if you turn it on.
Okay. So walk me through that. I install Avalara or whatever company in my checkout. Obviously, it's seamless to the customer. Where does the money go on the back end?
They reported. They actually submitted to, I believe they track it and they submit it to the state. And local.
So they track. Oh, so they track that. They track. Do they take?
They track it, and I think you have to submit all the tax form or whatever that is.
Do they take the money, or are they saying, okay, here's what you just basically making a report and saying, here's what you owe?
I think it's a report. I'm pretty sure.
Interesting.
I mean, we would have to look it up. I think some of them will submit it, but I think that
I just wanted to get a little more detailed because that seems like a sector that would actually, benefit from this legislation.
Well, Avalara just went public, so there's that.
Okay, then. Okay. Okay, the losers would be obviously some of the e-commerce retailers, and an example was written: Wayfair, Newegg, and Overstock, who are all involved in the case. They argued the complexity, which I was kind of saying earlier, was like the complexity and cost of collecting is going to put a lot of sellers out of business. Do you agree with that?
No,
you don't.
No,
you
because
think it's just it's a little
it's being
hysterical and
hyped up.
overblown.
Yeah, it's hyped up. I mean, listen, if you have Overstock and Wayfair and those guys, they're all about e-commerce, right? They have to integrate it. It's not that hard. Like, that's just part of it. You capture it, you put it up. There's plenty of services that will do it to you. It's just hysterical. It's not a big deal.
And you would think since they've been involved in the lawsuit, they've already got their plans in place. Their e-commerce managers already have this, kind of put on the shelf, waiting to pull the trigger. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, so absolutely, they're just pulling the trigger. They're doing. Listen, all these guys had to go through compliance and all that kind of stuff. So there's no if buts about it. But the other side of it is, it's if you look at it, people will be like, oh, well, the stores, all like actual retail will win on this. Well, not really. Convenience is becoming bigger and bigger. Delivery is becoming, selection so much bigger, and pricing is still better even with taxes. Like, they're not paying the tax on it. You're paying the tax on it. You know what I mean? Like, it's still going to be out there.
It's not like sales tax is going to be a big surprise for anyone. And I think it's just something that's kind of built into it.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to see like a sudden shift and suddenly people are going, fainting in the streets. I just, there was a quote from Paul Raffleson, Pace University law professor of the newly formed trade association, the Online Merchants Guild. He's quoting about how this would affect third-party sellers. We're talking about the guy that does the Amazon, fulfilled by Amazon, or maybe eBay people, or smaller shops. He says it would bring on an existential crisis for third-party sellers on marketplaces. I don't understand how that would work. Are they now going to be responsible for the sales tax of each of their little stores, or how does that work?
Yeah, they're going to have to shift of how they charge tax. And like an eBay seller is responsible for their own taxes.
Sure. So an eBay seller would have, so I'm selling a deck of cards on eBay, and I have to figure out now, if I'm in North Dakota, that I have to charge a different tax than if I ship this over to New Jersey.
Yeah, I mean, eBay is going to have to integrate that in their software, but
Sure.
You're still if you're selling a lot on eBay, you're a small business. You still got to take that income.
Yeah, because there was always that thing where you could charge tax on eBay when I was selling on eBay, and I was like, I don't understand this. I'll just leave this blank.
Right, so they already have it in there. They're just going to be mandatory.
I'll just leave this blank and cross my fingers. I don't know what I'm doing.
Right, all to do is make it mandatory in their system for the states that will say, yeah, we're now charging tax. But,
interesting. So on the news, obviously eBay stock fell 12.6%, Wayfair fell 9%, and Etsy fell 5.7%. This news came out last week, so who knows where their stock is right now, and the market's been a little weird this week. So they took a little hit from that. Did they say, so when does this is a ruling, but it's not in effect, or when does this happen?
It's determined by states. So whatever state says, that's what they're going to do.
So a state can say, okay, now we're going to go with this, and this is now law.
Yeah.
This is big.
It's a funny ruling because it's not for everybody, right? It's whatever states decide to do.
Yeah, that's why it's not exact. So it's clear as mud. But it paves the way is basically what we're trying to say. It paves the way for states to go ahead and do this. So we still have to kind of sit back and wait for each state to decide what they're going to do. Correct?
Yep.
Interesting.
But that's why you have services that will track that stuff.
That's why you have the Avalaras of the world. Pretty cool. All right. Got anything else, Bart?
That is it.
All right. That's your eCommerce Minute for today. We'll see you on the internet tomorrow. That's it for today's show. If you like the show, do us a favor and subscribe, or leave us a review on iTunes. And don't forget, you can now listen to the eCommerce Minute on your Amazon device. Just add eCommerce Minute to your flash briefing. And finally, if you have a comment or suggestion, or just want to say hi, find us on social media @Sumo Heavy.